basically. My name's, well, let me introduce Bart from Masters of Pinball.
Hi, I'm Bart. I came from Poland. I took a really long flight here to Chicago, but I am alright now, and I am responsible for Masters of Pinball project, and I can be known for three mods, which is Chimichanga Track, Hell House, and Katana mod for all of them for Deadpool Pinball machine.
Yeah, and my name's Davey Price. I'm from Stumbler Pinball. Uh, Probably been in the mod making space for about sort of 4 years properly. The first mod that did really well for me was the Tokyo Neon. That's probably the one that most people are familiar with. That you can see in the bottom right corner there. It's a sign for Godzilla. And that kind of opened up the door for me to take the mod making thing a bit more seriously. I'm now doing it full time. It's my only gig, and I feel very privileged to be able to say that, even though it's also quite scary. Yeah. So today we're going to be basically just talking about the mod making process from the very start to the very end, and all of the bits in between. Um, Starting off with choosing the right mod and how to work that out, and all the steps that go into choosing that mod, what the skills are that you might need or might need to focus on in order to make mods, the actual production and fulfillment of those mods out to the customer, which we affectionately call the grind, and then the marketing, communication, and launch of that product, and then the aftermarket stuff, which is customer service and those aspects. Um, yeah, so how to choose the right mod. So, uh, Bart, do you want to tell me how you go to choosing which mods that you want to do?
Yeah, so first I'm trying to pick up the right machine, and for me, like the most important part was choosing the machine which is very close to my heart. So I'm trying to pick up the theme that I am really connected with, and that's why this is why I chose Deadpool, because I have a lot of fun watching all the movies with my girlfriend, and I am big also. I am very crazy about all the comic book with Deadpool too, and the Deadpool is created by George Gomez, who is one of my favorite designers. So it was my machine that I chose, and I was happy with. So I think choosing the machine that you are connected to makes you more focused, and it, somehow it makes you create some things that you were at first I you know not so I've lost my context. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
so but
I'm a little bit stressed out, but
so
uh,
Deadpool's an interesting game, though, isn't it? Because when it comes to choosing the pinball machine that you want to look at to make mods for, generally the prevailing wisdom tends to be that you just follow the latest and greatest release. So most mod makers will look at what Stern's doing, wait for that release to come out, and then pile on essentially and try and sort of create as many mods as possible. So a game like Deadpool, even though it was a very popular game and has got a really loyal customer base,
yeah.
it's still an older title. So choosing Deadpool is a little bit off-piste in terms of what the prevailing
Yeah,
wisdom is for mod
yeah.
making.
I jumped into the Deadpool in very late, so I knew what was on the market. I knew what was released already on the market, so I could find my gaps, right? And I could provide something that was standing out. So it was quite, more easy job than trying to run the hype.
Yeah, and it also has the advantage that you don't have to compete as strongly with the other mod makers because it is in the past. My bag's there. Oh, okay, man. Yeah. It's awkward. There you go, dude. Don't worry, it's fine. Yes. But there's various other factors that we always try and think about when looking at games. So obviously, uh, when a game comes out, um, we try and get a gauge of how popular that title is, because the more popular it is, the more games they're going to sell, means the bigger market we're going to have for selling mods. So there's a bit of a time frame challenge there too, though, because the longer you leave that to try and work that out, the more likely it is that other people are going to start creating mods for areas that you want to focus on, and you've lost your window. So it's a bit of a juggling act to try and work out those things. And that can be watching the pinside threads, trying to get sort of a gauge of the hype for it, whether people are excited about the release, see what the competition is across the board, and then just sort of, I mean, Stern are always going to sell more games, so they're going to create a bigger market for you. But then if JJP release a game that you're really passionate about, um, do you take that risk and like reduce your market, but for something that you really want to do?
Yeah, what I would suggest is also trying to track the production length of the machine. So you would, if something is produced at a long period of time, you are making sure that there is a plenty of those machines on the market. So probably the sales of your mod are more,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah,
more expected to raise your expectations. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I also think a lot about whether I've worked on that architecture machine before. So I obviously have really good solutions in place for power management on a Stern machine, for how to sense switches and lamps on a Stern machine. If I was going to decide to do a mod for a Barrels of Fun game, I'd have to essentially start from scratch, work out where that mod was going to get its power source from, work out whether Barrels even has, a power distribution board that I could tap into, work out whether their switches are designed in the same way as
Maybe,
switches in other
yeah,
games.
maybe different type of the connectors too, right?
Exactly. Yep. So there's all these factors that are going to increase your R&D time when looking at a game architecture that you've not looked at before. The other thing I was going to say too, I mean, you talked about production numbers and stuff, and trying to work out how well a game is saying. Call the distros if you've got any friends who are distributors. Just give them a call and find out how good a game is selling, and that will give you a good indication too of like how big a market is going to be.
Yeah,
Um,
but this is not always easy because, for example, Stern is never officially open about their sales numbers.
No,
So
it's all guesswork, and
yeah,
there's there's a bit later in the presentation how we've sort of tried to sort of guess those numbers that a game is produced at, which is always a common topic of conversation amongst modders in particular to try and work out what those things are, but none of us have really got any idea. Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about that time window that you have on a release, and so there's a there's a difference between being the first to market and being the best to market. Um, there's obviously people that follow both approaches. How do you feel about that, Bart?
yeah, I think you have to ask yourself a question at first. Who are you aiming your mod to? So if you are aiming for like everyday player, you want to be fast and responsive, and you need to provide the mods as soon as possible, because the community will be hungry for the machine that are on the hype. So, but if you are aiming for the guys who are the collectors and they are valuing the very detailed and refined products, and then you have a lot of time for preparation for the tests, and for especially for the design time of your mod, right?
Yeah, I kind of don't even have a choice really because being in the UK, we are always the last to get our games like across everywhere. Obviously, the US is first, Europe gets them before we do as well, and we're the absolute last. So most of the time, I don't even have the choice of being first to market, and so you kind of just have to try and be the best after that point.
But you were quite fast on this JOS. Uh,
On Jaws,
yeah.
no, it
No,
wasn't.
no, no,
No,
no.
there was a lot of mods that came out before that, so all the wheels
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no. But luckily nobody had chosen that area of the playfield to do any work on, so I got away with it in that case.
Yeah, so this is like we are watching what is going on US market, and we are seeing some releases of the new mods, and shit, this is what I wanted to do, and
Yeah,
shit, this is another thing what I wanted to do.
yeah, yeah. And there's always there's in recent years there's been a really good dialogue between the mod makers to sort of communicate with each other when you're sort of thinking about working on a particular area, and there's always going to be that overlap and that crossover. And I think up till now we've sort of managed it quite well and just sort of absorbed it as a byproduct of there being a lot of people in this space. It's going to happen that you're going to inevitably choose to do something that's the same as something that somebody else is going to do, and most of the time you just shrug it off and move on. But in selecting the mod that you want to do, there's various factors at play, and choosing the area of the play field. It could be down to, whether you want to improve something in the game, whether you want to replace a plastic with something that's a bit more three-dimensional, how simple or complex you want that mod to be, whether you want it to be static, interactive, or game-changing. And I've got some examples up on the slide there that you can see. Um, the first one is the White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. That's a new mod that's come out from Pinball. And that's literally just a well-painted sculpt. So we refer to those as static mods. The second one is Bart's Chimichanga mod for Deadpool. And that's interactive with the game.
Yeah, Chimichanga have front lights, roof lights, and back lights, which are like pulsating all the time. But there are two versions of Chimichanga. The basic one, which was using the stock flasher on the top of it. And when I asked Davey what he is thinking about my new project, he said, "Oh, Bart, maybe you should make something like more interactive. More, we could do like flames on the top, which will have real flames effect, like the ones you remember from the speaker lights,
Yeah, for Godzilla.
for Godzilla, for
Mm.
example." Yeah, and then I started to starting to make more research. I done some more designs of the product, and together we finished the product with the Chimichanga Deluxe Edition, which have this amazing flames on the top of it.
And that reacts to the game too, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
So
it have separate. It has a separate functionality because it's connected to the switches on the left orbit, on the right orbit of the game. So it's quite interactive, right?
And so the final one I've got down there is game changing, which tend to be the most controversial of all the mods, besides maybe people gluing Happy Meals to their games, which are also quite controversial. But game changing mods are mods where the mod maker has intentionally done something that alters how the game plays. And that could be changing a wire form, it could be creating new ball paths, or in the case of the mod that you see here, putting in a shark that eats the ball back into Jaws, which everybody was clamoring for. Now, Trent at Interactive Pinball did that Jaws ball eater mod. He has also done other game-changing mods like the Rick and Morty
Yes,
Jerry Ramp.
subway. Yeah.
Yeah, which created a new ball path for Rick and Morty in order to hit the garage easier. Um, but it's tough for these mod makers who create these mods because they get a lot of pushback from the community.
Yeah, they are quite controversial,
Yeah,
right?
very controversial indeed. Yeah, I think Trent found it very difficult. Um, so yeah, so they're the sort of the options that are in front of you when you go to make that mod. Um, so let's say you've decided which mod you want to make, you're really excited and happy about it, you think it's going to be great, you've sort of done the work and put the thing into place. How do you work out where you price that mod?
Uh, the pricing is really tough. So you need to, first of all, you need to make an inventory of the parts that you are trying to build up your mod. So you're taking all the prices, summarizing all the prices, then you are summarizing the prices of all the people that are helping you out to deliver the project. The Pinball Mods project is my like side gig, so I'm doing a lot of different stuff, and I have a lot of people who are helping me to deliver the products. I have a guy who is responsible for the 3D design. I have a person who is responsible for painting, and my girlfriend is doing all the soldering stuff. So I have three staff who I need to cover in this pricing prediction. And at the end, I also need to think about the boxing and securing all the products for the shipment because in most of the cases, 95% of my sales are the sales from US. So I need to make sure that all stuff will be delivered in one piece. And you don't want to be in my skin when something goes wrong. And anyway, if I will secure the products very well, sometimes the situation comes up like, I received the product which is broken and I need to as a supplier offer the replacement or refund, right? So at the end, when you have all the costs, then you are thinking about some margin and something that can sustain the business, right? So that's how I work with that.
And I suppose it's that margin calculation that would differ from business to business and how that margin is calculated. We had a brief talk about
Yeah.
the differences between the way that we do it, and obviously the mod scene has mods from from $20 all the way up to $1,000, and everybody sort of positions themselves within that costing structure differently, depending on, I guess, how much they perceive the value of their mods to be, and probably various other factors as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that last calculation is probably a very subjective thing, and that's up to the individual as to where they want to make that margin calculation.
Yeah, and this is also, if you want to calculate your margin, you can also, there is different methods. For example, they have this fixed,
Yeah, I usually work towards a fixed cost depending on where the mod is. Like if it's a sort of like a really cheap mod, then it's a different calculation. It'll be more percentile margin based. But generally, I just aim for a certain figure because I know that that's the figure that is sustainable across all mods to then, keep the business running and keep people getting paid and those kind of things.
and for example, me, I have a lot of experience with the distribution. So I took all this experience and I am calculating my margin in compare of percentage to the final price of the product. So it is, for example, when I get an offer for B2B partnership, I can easily calculate the discount level for B2B partners and so
Mm.
on, in such a way.
Yep. So, and we're sort of jumping around a bit here, so I apologize for that. But let's get to the point where you're sort of ready to start sending that mod out to people. There's a point here about asking for early impression feedback. We've got Richie and Alex over here from Stellar Pinball. Hi guys. But one thing that you guys did really well, I think, with the Kong plane mod is got it out to people early, got it out to beta testers to test it and to give you that feedback. And I think that's like an absolutely critical step, and it's a step that I've missed in the past, and it's come back to bite me on the ass. Um, with the theatre mod, we talked a little bit about the early sort of issues that were affecting the theatre mod early on. That became a very difficult issue for me because we'd sent out more than we should have. We should have started with a smaller number of beta testers, made sure that it was playing exactly as it should, um, and then increased the scope of the people who were receiving that mod. But as it turns out, because there was a problem that we didn't pick up during the testing cycle, we were then in a situation where we had to work out a solution um, for that problem, but with more people being involved, which complicates things. So I think that's a really critical step. It's quite important, particularly with small businesses where you might not have the resources of bigger companies to have larger testing cycles with more people involved.
Yeah, and I can explain how I received the situation from the customer experience because I order also the theater mod from Davy, and then I wrote an email that there is something wrong with it, but Davy acknowledged the product. He was very open about it, and he was very transparent, and quickly he fixed the problem. So it was great idea. It was like great situation to show that he's staying here for longer and he's caring about the community, and no matter the cost, he's providing the solution to some flaws, right?
And I think that transparency is like absolutely key in this industry, and acknowledging those problems, getting out ahead of them, making an announcement, contacting all the people personally who are involved, and then getting a solution in place and a time frame for that, and being open about what that timeline is going to be. I think that problems are going to happen, and it's the way, it's inevitable, and it's the way that we respond to them. I think that really makes or breaks a company. So fortunately, yeah, we were able to move on from that. So the next point in here is about IP infringement, which is always something that scares the living hells out of all mod makers. Unfortunately, we receive less heat from IP complaints than companies, who are making toppers and things like that, probably because of the price point differences. But it's always something that has sort of come up. I know TAP Pinball, the electric playground, for their very first Godzilla mod, they received cease and desist from Stern when they made that because the art was too closely resembling Zombie Yeti's art. And so that was a learning experience for them, and it's colored their decision making ever since. And they're very aware of IP infringement and the potential for problems with that. We talked as well about Lior's Guns N' Roses topper.
Topper, yeah.
Yeah, and he had the same issue with that, and that got, I think it was on the market for 2 days and then got pulled, and we never heard of it again.
Yeah.
I was actually speaking to my wife about that, and she said that Guns N' Roses are the most
Strict.
strict,
Yeah.
yeah, litigious, protectors of their copyright and their IP, within within the industry. So they're renowned for sort of chasing down infringements in that case. So
Yeah.
um,
At the moment we are observing how strict there are the license holders for Harry Potter stuff, right?
yeah, I know that there was somebody who created a speaker plate, sorry, a shooter plate with the Harry Potter logo on it, so the HP and the lightning bolt, and they received a C&D for that speaker plate and had to take it down, and I think had to change the design. So it's an interesting one in terms of whether it's, the license holders are observing it more during the initial release of the game and during that sort of hype cycle, and whether the heat dies down in 6 months' time, possibly not to reproduce an HP logo or something like
Yeah.
that, but likenesses and variations of likenesses, like for Godzilla, for example, there's a lot of grey area as to, you know, whether it's Godzilla or whether it's just a giant lizard creature,
Yeah.
and I think some people have sort of suggested that that's one way to skirt around that issue, is to not actually use any references to the thing that it actually is, but to say that it's some kind of other thing.
Yeah.
I've not had any issues with it so far, but I imagine that it'll happen one day.
Yeah, what I would recommend is to be mindful of intellectual properties and, stay with the projects that are more generic and they are not exact replicas of the some of the items like X-Wings or Lord Vader helmets and so on, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay. So how to choose the right mod. So this is where we're jumping around a bit. But I just thought I'd have this interesting example of sort of data that we've collected as a result of making mods. Um, and you know, we said earlier that you don't know what you don't know. So Stern are never going to release their figures for how many Godzillas were sold. And we've tried to infer what that figure is just by using our sales data to try and work it out. Um, so who's got a guess as to how many Godzillas have been made in existence? Does anyone want to make a guess? 10,000? 50,000? 15,000. So I reckon it's more around 20,000. I think. Okay, all right, yeah. So 20 is the figure that I thought it was. Now, I've and this is such a, making a really crap maths calculation, but I've sold 2,000 Tokyo Neon mods. Um, Now, if they've sold 20,000, that would mean that there's a Tokyo Neon in one in every 10 Godzillas, which I still think is overestimating how many are in those, Godzillas that are out there. But that might be sort of the minimum. I'd probably say it'd probably be close to like 1 in 15 or 1 in 20. So that means that there's a lot of Godzillas out there. But a figure that I am sort of that is less sort of rough maths is what the percentage of pro games sold to premium and LE games is. Because for the Tokyo Neon, when I send it out, I ask people whether they've got a pro or a premium or an LE. because that dictates what cabling I sent them. Now, again, there's errors with this calculation because it doesn't take into account the fact that most pros or a lot of pros would be sighted, so people might not be putting mods in those games that are sighted. Perhaps premium and LE owners are more inclined to mod their games than a pro owner who might not. But it's still an interesting figure. So what do people think out of the mods that I've sold anyway? What do you think the split is between pro on one side and premium LE on the other? Any ideas for Godzilla?
This might be a tricky question.
3 to 1. Okay. 5%. 75%. Yeah. What do you reckon, Bart?
Yeah, mostly guys who are buying pro editions, I think they are focused on the gameplay, then on the mechs and, integration of the mods. So I would say also like 20 to 80 maybe, but I guess this might be a tricky question, so I will
It's
say
five
60 to
five
40.
5% to 95%. I'll send out, yeah, 5%. So out of the mods that I send out to people, um, 5% will be pros and 95% will be premium LEs. We'll do an entire run of 50 mods and there won't be a single pro in there. So it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. I know. It's a lot higher than what you would expect, and a lot higher than what we anticipated when we sort of started out. Yeah, sure. Yep, yep. For the Jaws one, so I was collecting that data, but it didn't actually dictate what version I sent out to them because the version's essentially the same for me. So I do have that data, but the only reason I sort of know this one off by heart is because we have to check the order sheets before we send them out. So I'm not actually sure what it is with Jaws, but I'll check now that you've said it. So it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, yeah. The data's all there, but I just need to pull it out. Okay, so we're talking a little bit about skills that you might need to make mods. And the first sort of set, and before we even sort of start this stuff, let me just say that, all mod makers don't know all of these skills. Quite often a mod maker will be very specialized in one area. My background is in coding. So the code side of things and the circuit board side of things is, where most of my skill set lies. I've taught myself 3D modeling because I really enjoy it. But a lot of people just find people or connect with people with these skills and then work with them as a collaboration or as using them as a supplier or whatever. But we're just going to go over them anyway because it's interesting. So in terms of 3D modeling, there's probably three tools that get most often used, and the first is Fusion 360, which is a free-ish tool by Autodesk that is really great at creating sort of mechanical sort of models. And that's primarily the tool that I use. You can see in the graphic that I've got there, you start out with a 2D drawing of what you want to do, and then you extrude that 2D drawing to create a 3D shape. I think before I started 3D modeling, I, sort of thought that creating a 3D object was like black magic. But the idea that you can start by just drawing it in a 2D plane and then extruding it into a 3D plane just made a lot of sense. And it's actually got a really low bar for like a learning curve. So anybody that wants to start out getting into 3D modeling, check out Fusion 360. It's a really, really fantastic tool. Another fantastic tool, it's not as easy to use, is ZBrush, and that's more on the sculpting side of things. So for anybody that wants to be creating caricatures or organic sculptures, ZBrush is the tool to do it. Works on a very much like a clay modeling sort of sculpting process. But it's got a really, really steep learning curve. I've used a lot of software over the years, and it's like nothing I've ever seen or used before. And a lot of its features are hidden behind weird menus that don't make any sense to anybody that hasn't been using it for years and years. Yeah, that's a couple of tools. Circuit board design. Uh, so if you want to create mods that sort of are very interactive with the game, learning how to create sort of circuit boards, whether they're easy ones or complicated ones, is sort of almost a must. But fortunately, there's a lot of amazing tools out there these days for doing so. And one of the best ones I feel is Easy EDA, which is a free online tool that is sort of, I guess, a sister company of a probably the biggest Chinese circuit board manufacturer. Um, and it's the tool that they use to sort of integrate with their fabrication backend. Absolutely fantastic bit of software. That's what I use to do everything. And you can, it's linked up with component libraries, so you can drop in components, wire them all up together, see a 3D representation of your board, export that 3D representation of your board as an OBJ that you can take back into Fusion 360 and make sure it matches up with your models. Um, and then once that's complete, essentially just click a few buttons, order your circuit boards through the fabrication side of that business, and they arrive in a couple of weeks ready to test. Really exciting stuff, particularly the first couple of times you do it and you receive a circuit board in the mail. And wiring it up for the first time and then finding out it doesn't work and trying all over again. But it is the first couple of times I did it, I just couldn't believe that it was even possible to do this. And if you're like me and like doing nerdy things, it's a really fantastic hobby to get into, circuit board design. But likewise, print farms as well. There's a lot of 3D printing companies out there who can, print all manner of materials. The technology's come so far that we're even printing with stainless steel these days. And some of the results that you get are just absolutely unbelievable. And if you're going to do things in large numbers, using a print farm is almost a must, just because they can do stuff a lot faster and in much greater scale than you can with home printers, which we're going to get to now. When you're starting out, home printing is definitely the way to go. Bart, what's your experience with home printing?
Yeah, so I started with resin printing. Each type of printing has its own learning curve, so it's like 3D printing is a hobby on its own. So there is a lot of stuff you have to know or you have to learn, but there is plenty of videos on YouTube that are, helping out to get into the hobby. So I'm doing all printing stuff in my office. I have a separate room. So with the resin printing, you have to be very mindful because you are exposed to resins, and the resins are very toxic stuff. So you need to have very well ventilated area. Maybe you should buy like carbon filters that change the air and clean up the air in the room. You should have safety gear like masks and gloves because when the resin are being exposed to screens, which are at the
UV.
bottom, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the screens are emitting the UV light, and the UV light is curing the resin, right? So at the time of curing, there's a lot of gases,
Yeah.
create the UV process creating a lot of gases which are also toxic to you. So you need to have the masks. You need to have a lot of area to prepare the products after the printing process. So you need to have like UV curing stations, cleaning stations with isopropyl alcohol, which is also not nice for the people or your kids or pets. So you have to be very careful, and you have to all the time clean the whole area very often because it's quite messy business.
Yeah, especially when you spill resin, which has happened to everybody, I
Yeah,
imagine.
and the other thing, the printing is not like printing on the paper. When you get the model, you have to prepare it for the printing. So there is plenty of programs that are the tools like slicers. They are called slicers, And I can recommend lychee slicers because it is very fastly developing, and there's plenty of automatic tools that are helping you to support the projects. But you need to learn how to support the project so they won't fail at the time of the printing process. The printing process is very costful because the resin are quite expensive and time consuming. So for example, if you will support the project at 90% it will fail, the whole work and whole time is gone. So
Yeah, yeah.
Find some model. For example, I made like three sculptures. I found three sculptures for my Dungeons and Dragons, and I just printed it by myself with the small printer. Costed like 500 bucks is the printer cost. Then you buy 1 liter
Yeah.
of resin. So for a cheap way, you can also make your own, for fun sculptures. There are a lot of
Yes.
online places when you can buy ready models, just modify them a little to fit on the
Yeah.
play field or whatever. So this is
Yeah.
also the way for mods.
Absolutely. I mean, it's never
Thank you.
there's never been a better time to sort of start doing your own printing at home. The printers are, affordable, particularly for really good ones. The quality level's improving all the time, um, and it's really fun. Like I think there is a definitely a learning curve with resin printing, and for all the reasons that Bart mentioned in terms of needing to make, yeah, safety really being the big one, but it is a messy process, which and it's messier at the start too when you really don't know what you're doing. You do develop techniques in your workflow to make sure it's less messy, and it becomes a lot easier after some time, but there is that learning process. The other type of printers that are available to people are filament printers, or FDM, um, which are the ones we all know as when somebody says, "Oh, it's 3D printed," that's what we know as a 3D printer. It's a filament printer printing PLA, which is a different process to resin. It's with resin, the screen's at the bottom, and the build plate comes out. It gets essentially pulls the piece out of the resin as it's getting made, whereas filament printing is from the top, and the build plate goes down as the filament gets pushed out. Um, Filament printing is a lot easier to manage. There's only that one process. You essentially just start the print, and then wait for however long it's going to take to print, then pull it off the build plate and it's ready to go. So if probably I know that Bart started out with resin printing first because the quality level tends to be better, and there's particularly with the newer sort of 4K and 8K printers, you really don't see the layer lines, so the quality level of your prints is going to be a lot better. Um, but for people who are just starting out, or people who want to do prototyping, which is primarily what I use filament printers for, getting a printer from Bamboo Labs like the X1C that you can see pictured here, which has like multiple spools in the AMS at the top, which means you can do multicolor printing in the one print. Are really fantastic machines that are really reliable, really good quality, really fast. And yeah, I'd highly recommend, you know, that printer in particular for anybody who wants to start out.
yeah, and I would not suggest saving up money on the hardware as for the 3D printers, because for example Bamboo Labs, if you buy the Bamboo Lab printers, you don't have to spend so much time and research on the calibration. You will have more successful prints
Right off the
than,
block.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Okay, painting. But do you do your own painting?
Yeah, sometimes, but mostly not. And I have a person, this person name is Marek, and he's like miniature painter for many many years. He's done ton of miniature painting, and I was introduced to him by my girlfriend, and we managed to do some collaboration. So Marek is doing all sorts of painting, like airbrushing, dry brush styles, the watery.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, washers and
yeah,
things.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the miniature painting scene is such a amazing resource for anybody that wants to get into painting mods or painting in general, really. There's a ton of resources on YouTube with people showing you exactly how to get particular effects with miniature painting, how to create slime effects, how to create rust effects, um, even down to showing you exactly what paint you need to buy, which is, a lot of the problem really, just finding the right sort of product to use to get the effect that you want. But also, in terms of dry brushing, showing you that, circular brush motions are a way to get one type of effect with dry brushing, rather than like direct strokes and things that you wouldn't necessarily even think about until somebody pointed them out to you. And it, makes a lot of sense. So for anybody that wants to sort of up their painting game, watching miniature painting tutorials on YouTube is the best way to do it. You mentioned airbrushing as well. Airbrushing is a fantastic uh, tool in the
fast.
painting. Yeah, really fast, really consistent, no brush lines. Um, and the one thing I would say about airbrushing is don't make the mistake that I did and buy one of those really cheap airbrushing kits off Amazon that have a compressor about this big, because they just don't work and the results are absolute crap. So if you do want to get into airbrushing, and you should, because it's really good fun, and it creates amazing effects, do yourself a favor and buy like a decent compressor like the one pictured. I think that's actually quite an expensive one, but you can see similar compressors about for maybe $100, and they'll be fantastic compressors that you can use with your airbrush. Um, yeah, and there's another technique we use a lot of is water slide decals. Bart, you've used them before on the chimichanga.
Yeah, yeah, I've used the water slide decals on the places where you have to make some signatures or signs and so on, because they would be very time consuming at the time of hand painting. So the best way to do it is, in my opinion, to use the water slide decals. And you have to use two types of the products to make the final look. The one of the products is like softening the water slide decal, so it align perfectly to the place and the surface. And the other one is clear coat. So
Yeah, yeah, that's
quite
right.
easy, quite fast to do, and everybody can do it.
Yeah, and you can literally just buy water slide decal paper off Amazon or similar company, and then just print it using your, whatever printer you have at home, um, and then a couple of coats of clear coat over the top of that just to keep the ink sealed, because obviously you have to place those decals in water so that they separate from the backing paper. Um, and the clear coat helps retain that ink so that it doesn't bleed once you put it in that water. But it's certainly not complicated to get set up making water slide decals, and it's cheap as anything, and it's really effective.
Yeah, what I do, I ordering this water slide decals from the companies who are strictly specialized in printing water slide
Oh,
decals.
okay, yeah, oh, fancy.
Yeah.
Yours are probably better quality than mine then. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about sort of marketing and advertising and how you get your name out there and how you promote yourself. But how do you do that?
Um, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to build up anticipation for my product. So I'm letting know I'm doing I'm letting know the community that I'm working on something. I'm providing some small pics of the small pics of the product, so everybody could wait for my final product. And I'm trying to be as responsive as possible. I'm also, when I'm ready for the release, I am trying to make the best I can the video promotion of the product, and that's mostly what I do.
Yeah, yeah. So I think initially Pinside is probably one of the best resources for a new mod maker to get their name out there and to sort of start forming that bond with the community, and reaching the customers. Certainly, that's how I did it with the Tokyo Neon. Once you have sort of built up your customer base, it sort of becomes a little bit easier because you've already got people's email addresses that you can contact them about, send out email marketing newsletters, those kinds of things. You might be then in a position to have created your website, have more of a platform for promoting your products through that. Um, so it does become easier later, but using those free sort of community tools like Facebook, there's a great pinball mods group on Facebook that a lot of people use using Pinside, and using the resources that are available to us that don't have to involve having your own website and promoting it that way, and having to get involved in like search tools and SEO and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can always also ask community about the feedback about the product, but don't leave like the open questions. Just ask specific questions, like what do you think about this color of the paint on this product, or here's what I'm working on. What do you think about it, and so on.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way of sort of creating that engagement and that sense that people have got sort of ownership over the end result. I think that's a really effective way of doing it. Um, you know, also, so Rob from TEP and myself, we sort of have a podcast where we sort of talk about modding a lot, and that's creating that sort of content. 3 minute, we better speed it up.
Cool.
So you can see the videos that I've got up on YouTube here, and I've sort of put in my the views for those videos. I thought that was a really interesting statistic that the Jaws buoy of death has beaten the theater in terms of how many people have watched that video. Um, uh, One of the other really boring aspects of making mods is keeping track of parts. And
Yeah.
I've found that one of the most difficult things to manage as my business has grown, making sure that you don't run out of things. Because if you're partway through a build and you run out of a particular screw, you can't continue that build until you get that screw again. And being in the UK, we don't have access to UNC screws easily. They have to be specially ordered. So if I run out of a 632 machine screw, I'm not going to be able to get one of those easily from the hardware store.
Davey, how many mods do you do at one time?
I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 at any one time. So yeah, it all has to be cataloged and taken care of. And we put in very sophisticated systems in place that this is an online tool called Box Hero that I use to um, both catalog all the parts that go into a mod, but also keep track of what the inventories of those are, what the numbers are. We also have another system that I've built that knows how many parts go into a single variant of a mod. And then when that mod gets sent out, the system automatically picks that up and then decrements the stock in Box Hero. Likewise, when I put an order in for 1,000 screws because I've run out again, we create a sales order in Box Hero, and then when they arrive, I say that they've arrived, and then that increments the stock to that level. So essentially, I've removed all of the potential for user error in decrementing and incrementing stock, which is always going to happen if somebody needs to remember to do it.
Yeah, but when you are starting and you don't know if you will get through this whole project, you can start with the spreadsheets because they are
Yeah,
the easiest and
yeah,
most approachable ones.
yeah, and that's how we all do it to begin with, for sure. So I think this is the last slide, but I think we're getting a time call. So, um, you know, I think the main thing here that I wanted to mention was like automation. When you've got a small business, just automate the crap out of it however you can. And that can be doing simple things like, creating a frequently asked questions page so that people can answer questions before they get to you. Um, you know, Anticipate that certain questions are being asked all the time and work out where the problem lies and why people are needing to ask that question more often. Is it because your installation documentation isn't good enough? Is it because you're not making that information available on your website in a helpful way or a sensible way? So yeah, just automate everything that you can just to try and give yourself more speed on the ground. Um, we'll cut it there. If anybody has any questions, maybe yes.
Seeing where the mod scene has been going back a couple years now since I got into pinball, where I'll call it first wave of printed quality of materials
Yeah.
that kind of was like to where they are now, which is amazing. Where do you see the future of modding going? Obviously, things are starting now to interact, move. One of the things I've been very curious about is, do you think it could get to a point where we could have mods that actually will like will hear sounds from in the game? I know that may be complicated, but
For sure it is. For me, um, the the thing that I'm trying to chase is a closer integration with the manufacturers. So if if I could convince the manufacturers to create um, a more mod-friendly platform for us, it would mean that we wouldn't have to tap into switches, wouldn't have to tap into lamps, wouldn't have to, do all this crazy stuff that complicates the install for the customer, doesn't give us as much information as we need in order to be properly mode aware. So when I sort of did the collaboration with Dutch Pinball, because I was sort of involved at the level where I could work with the programmer to send out that game state information on a USB cable, and I just listened to it over serial. It means that the side rails on Alice can just be completely in tune with what the game's doing. And I personally would love it if that became like a standard across the industry, so that certain game state information could just be piped out a serial line somewhere. We could pick it up and respond to it, and that would make the mods be more interactive. It would make them more integrated with the game. It would make them feel more embedded and interesting and fun, and it would just open up a lot of doors for us. So that's what I'm hoping.
Last question.
Hey, I own a company called PinMod Studio, and we've done really well in doing mods in just the last 4 months. I just started. My question to you is, when you see somebody else who's made a mod and you go, oh boy, that mod is not very good, and I could do better, or you were thinking of doing that mod, and so I try to have an etiquette myself to where I don't step on someone's toes. But the same token, I see some mods out there like yours and your guys over here, amazing mods. And so if you can impress me, you've done a really good job.
Thanks.
So I look at that, and my question is, what do you do when you see someone else's mod that you know that you could do better? What do you do?
Do you want to have a crack?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, it happens. So the Mimic mod that's still coming, there's about 3 or 4 Mimic mods. Now I'd sort of started developing on that. So we sort of partway through the R&D, and then these other ones came out. So I really try and foster like a real sense of sort of camaraderie amongst mod makers in the scene. I think it's so important for a whole host of reasons. So when things like that happen, there's a real possibility that that could lead to resentment and things like that. So for me personally, I just sort of, go straight at it. I contact people and I say, hey, look, I'm really sorry. I am working on that. Hopefully we can coexist together. No hard feelings. And um, I think we're all aware that that happens, and it's impossible not to step on people's toes. And I think as long as everyone realizes that it's not like a vindictive thing and you're not trying to screw anybody over, then, I think we all just move on and move on to the next mod. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for, this is a new part of the whole field of pinball that we need more seminars about things like this. So thanks for doing this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for listening.